your home. Make yourself comfortable. Just kidding, we're going to make you move around. Not just me, all of us. Yeah.
No,
but in case I forget, when we actually do break out and start putting stuff on the wall, we're not writing on the wall. We're taking it down and writing it on and then putting it on the wall, lest we get a bill from the University of Georgia for painting their wall. Okay, so I'll quickly start the introductions. Thank you for coming to our session. So on professional identity formation, it's no accident. I'm Amanda Rivas. I'm the Associate Director of St. Mary's Externship Program. I've been in the Externship Program for about 7 years so far, since we started the Externship Program at St. Mary's.
And I'm Cecily Becker. I'm the Director of the Externship Program at Texas A&M School of Law.
I'm Phyllis, Kotey. I'm Director of the Externship and Pro Bono Program at Florida International University in Miami, and I've been doing that since 2003.
Okay, so the most important thing here is that idea that it's no accident, right? So we're talking about the fact that we're injecting intent here. So this is about the intentional approach to professional identity formation. And the reason we talk about this idea of an accident is because, as you know, externships are right for professional identity formation. It's going to happen. Or as I like to say, right, if a tree falls in a forest, which it's going to fall, who's going to be there? Does it make a sound? Is anyone there to hear that it's fallen and that there might be some damage or some goodness happening? So the whole point is we don't know what the impact is of this professional identity formation. The tree's going to fall in the forest. There may not be anyone there to hear a sound. Okay? So we're taking it out of accident and thinking about the intent. So we're being very purposeful in what we're doing because at least that awareness can lead to more increased impact, is what we're hoping, right? And long-term effectiveness. This is measurable, right? So now we're able to track the progress, or if necessary, turn the volume up on that tree that might have fallen down. We're actually there to ask, hey, did anyone hear that? Did you see that happen? Professional identity formation in general, or a tree falling down. So what is professional identity formation? And I'm glad we came, we're on Friday after that great first plenary session where we had a lot of this conversation and started talking about some of these things. Here's, it is diverse definitions, because we're all diverse placements, right? So like externship, it's diverse definitions, coming from diverse perspectives, and we have diverse goals. We have different things that our students may need from this. And I got that from Marking the Path, from this great article that I told Kendall that I would plug because it's awesome. So let's look at some of the examples here. So here's one of the examples of the definition out here. Someone want to read this?
The goal of
Joanna.
professional...
Oh, great. Yeah. Joanna, you can read the second one.
The goal of professional formation is for lawyers to
Just that
practice
first part.
competently and effectively, to practice with integrity and authenticity, and to lead lives of satisfaction and fulfillment.
That's good. So like the rest of it just expounds on that. So the idea of this integration, this is one of the popular approaches or definitions for professional identity formation. Here's another one from the Holland Center. Joanna, you want to
Change from thinking like a student toward acceptance and internalization of responsibility to others, particularly the person served, and for the student's own proactive development toward excellence as a practitioner at all of the competencies of the profession.
So that's Neil Hamilton and the Halloran Center, if you've never seen that definition. Here's another definition from the Ethics and Professionalism Symposium. This is straight from their website, but Patrick Longin actually put this together in part of his opening remarks for this symposium. Anyone want to read this? Bill? Unfortunate you don't know your
A
name.
set of values, skills, dispositions that enable the lawyer to serve clients and the public well in complex, stressful, and uncertain circumstances, including ones that present questions of ethics, morality, and professional responsibility.
Okay, so that's another definition there. I think this is our last one, teaching professional identity in law school.
So I'll take it because I'm going to go from there to talk about what we do, and I hate sitting and talking, sorry. So one of the things, and the reason I chose this definition, so it says, it's the way a lawyer understands his or her role relative to all the stakeholders in the legal system, including the client, court, opposing party, and counsel, the firm, and even the legal system itself. So one of the reasons, or the reason that I favor this as a definition in terms of what it does, and I guess as we look at all of our definitions, let's look at all our definitions, there are all these common themes about exploring and identifying values and duties and standards. And one of the most important things we do as that externship instructor or professor is to help our students kind of mesh the values and duties and standards that already exist. I mean, so when they come to us, they've already had professional responsibility many times, or they're taking it, or they've had criminal law or administrative law. So they're getting the opportunity to look at all these rules and everything else that has happened and before they get to us in such a way that we're able to mesh it and pull it together. It also helps them in understanding their role in the justice system. I think it's many times difficult for students to really feel that they can have an impact because I'm just a student and this doesn't matter. But we know that it does matter. And we know that it matters so much that we instill a whole lot of time and energy in having them be reflective and introspective, not only about their habits, but about what they say, about what they think, about what they do, because we care about the impact in terms of what happens.
Right, so these are the common themes, but as we are very different people and very different programs and very different schools and have very different students, we are very intentional about modifying and taking parts of the definition to come together and address some of the things that we felt were necessary that we could do within our own programs and that would meet our students' own needs. So let's look at what we kind of did, and we'll start with.
So one of the things, and part of the fun that I had in terms of developing this is that I didn't follow anyone. I was at a new law school that had just been built. So when I came up with ideas, I would look at the dean and say, no, that's the way we do it. Because he was a new dean as well. So I was like, believe me, I would lie. So I appeared at the law school in 2003 after a professional career as a prosecutor and a judge. I actually still sit as a senior judge occasionally. So I brought that body of thought about how we have to combine those things that we do and those things that we say as lawyers so that our students can understand. So we began a juvenile justice clinic that in fact was an externship that was combined with an actual administrative law clinic in educational law and a dependency clinic. It was dependency and delinquency. And then it evolved into now your more traditional civil, criminal, and judicial clinics. And just last year, after the change in rules, not only did we add law office placements, but we added law office placements where they're paid, to my great dismay. I hate it. But we deal with the changes. And then finally this year, I'm embarking upon trying to have an externship that will actually be an innocence project with a prosecutor's office that's 500 miles away. But we're going to review their cases. There will be a lawyer in the office working as a supervising attorney, but sort of a field placement externship. So the biggest thing, and I think the biggest freedom that I've been able to have in terms of my own externship has been that creativity. And I encourage you to think about that.
Yeah, so this is just focusing on what was my kind of definition of professional identity that I'm kind of organizing my class around. And I was using the Halloran Center one and I just put it back up here for reference again, that trying to help them focus on that transition from student to lawyer, and that they have to internalize that they accept that responsibility as a profession of service to others, as well as responsibility to themselves of self-development, of to become a competent lawyer, ethical professional, and to find a career that's satisfying and fulfilling. So in the end, I focus on having them kind of evaluate who they are and who they want to be, right? And then that they have this responsibility to themselves and to others. So that's what I'm focusing on is a definition.
And here at St. Mary's, and I just forgot to pass out our breakout thing, so I'm going to do that while I'm talking, because we're about to work in groups. Identifying, I felt like I needed to spend some time with my students identifying or having them identify their passions, their values, fueling their motivation. I thought that was important and key. Can we start here and keep moving stuff? Assessing and improving their self-directed learning, discovering a sense of duty to others, giving their sense of power and responsibility. So my intention was that there would be more introspection. That was my key in trying to identify a professional identity formation. So I felt like that was important. That there was some maturity and wisdom that might be injected with whatever definition, because I felt like that was something that my students needed. With much power comes much responsibility was the type of thing that I wanted them to realize the power they were going to get from this. Then the self-care and compassion I felt was definitely something that I felt was lacking in legal education in general, and that we would spend some more time doing in their experience and talking about self-care and how that was necessary, because it was sometimes one of the first times that students are juggling class and work and personal lives. And it really is a great time to make them pause and say, okay, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling stressed, what are you doing to cope? How are you doing that? So I wasn't sure they were doing that. And that they were finding some way that they had to feel compelled, that they're feeling like they found their place in the justice system and fulfilled. And then at the very end, I felt like I needed them to make sure that they had some sort of way to pivot, that they were learning how to pivot, to deal with the micro level changes that are happening. Your client changed the facts on the stand like you knew this whole time. There's some sort of policy change that happens that takes a rug out of your argument. You know, all of these changes, dealing with changes, that idea of pivoting on a macro level, adding a new practice area, how are they going to do that? Moving jobs, changing supervisors. So that was my big reason for finding a professional identity formation definition that works and trying to put that in there curricularly with some sort of intention. Those are my bigger goals. So let's look at our breakout discussion questions, and we're going to start. This is going to be a small little breakout. So break out into group, 3, 4 people. There's 3 people there, 4 people there. That's perfect 3. You can even do 2 people and split up and look at the discussion questions. And what I think, Inga kind of talked about this in our plenary when she was saying, I think it's important for us to talk about what our professional identity formation journey has been. What has brought you here? Why are you doing what you do? Why are you doing what you do? What motivates you and inspires you? Because if we're going to talk to our students about them identifying values and passions and things that are going to motivate them when they've got a really hard day in court and they have to go back, what's going to make them go and do that and fight another day? So I think we can model that. So let's break out and have a discussion about our own formation journey, and also the question of why you're here, what are you looking to get out of this? So we're going to give you just a little bit of time to start there, start thinking about your journey, what inspires you, what motivated you, and why are you here for your students? What do you want your students to get out of this? What is your goal? The instructions are there on number 1. And then we're going to go and tell you a little bit about what we've done so far, specifically in our curriculum. And then we're going to work in groups in the big video.
Right, I mean, I thought, so I did that part, and I thought it was good. Yes, I think it's good. I know. Are they all good news?
What are the questions? What are your goals? What topics? Is that the next this is somewhere in between.
So I think its intent is
I haven't thought about that.
not disclosed.
No, and that's what I'm saying. That's the important thing. That's the thing about professional identity. We really have all these definitions. There's no one way of looking at it, and one way that it's going to Well, yeah, but I mean, but it works. You know. Right. And then remember, the difference is I had no for 2 hours every week. Oh, that makes a difference, yeah. Because you can't. Absolutely. You want me to get, are you going to use some more? Me right now. Yeah, just it really is. We know this. I mean, just think about conversations that go. That's what's so comfortable in this group. It was so proportional and good perspective. We are fine. Yeah, I was thinking I need to be more intentional about collaboration, talking with my colleagues.
But also, this is a thing, 4 or 5 sessions.
It really is. Yeah.
Which is why I think it shouldn't happen exactly. It really is a field for the entire semester in a separate seminar.
And look at the sessions and they sound different. I mean, some of them will say freshman did
I was just looking short. Okay.
Great. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought we were at the time you will not jump in. But happy fun. Okay.
I think they.
It's just such an interesting issue.
And I don't have the right one anymore, so. I see. No. Food is my you put a steak in front of me and I can't resist. No. Well, yeah, I get I'm really okay. Really good. Besides, I mean, I had no doubt. I mean, I was going to change into something else, yeah. So this is not what I planned on presenting. Oh God, yes. And then it was, I was downhill, but then it went uphill. I have my luggage. Yeah, and then I kept calling King God, so I kept being off to King God, and I kept back to King God. And everybody who I know in Athens, they're all at my house right now. It's free. I thought I would be here to help me.
There's something pressing. Great. Just
Well, I was getting afraid. When I got here, you helped Amanda. I was about to.
You don't want to.
Thinking about the supervisor and the supervisor training.
How was it?
I do
But in well, these are like it's a whole other, but part of the conversation, and I didn't realize it was going to it was there all that yeah, you're just trying to fill it out.
Yeah, you guys, another minute wrapped up. We're going to hear some of the things that you talked about. Okay, so I just need 5 minutes to come back and I want to hear some of the things that were kind of important. Did you all get a chance to talk?
So Dana, why don't you guys tell us, like,
Yeah.
I know you're not agreeing.
So, I'll just say that our next portion is going to be adding context because we know sometimes we're not comparing apples to apples here, right? Our programs are different or diverse. We're going to make sure we understand exactly what we're comparing. So our next section, we're going to add a little bit of context and talk about what we did and how our programs are different and how we do that. Because what I can do, Phyllis can't do, or what I can't do, what Phyllis does, because my program structure. So you might have talked about that, but what were some other things you talked about in this section? What did you see yourself in this professional identity, formation journey? Did anything stand out? Did you connect with some other people? Were you able to find that your journey then might mirror or have some goals and what you want to do for your students, and that might be playing into it? And Phyllis, you had something. Cecily, you had something you were saying. God, look at how exciting everyone is about talking about it.
Well, for the first, when we started talking about, how do we introduce professional identity formation in our curriculum, and I said, sometimes that's a label, right? And the definition, people said, well, what do you mean? What is professional identity formation? And that's why I said, look at all these kind of different definitions. There are common themes, but they all have kind of different focuses or different emphasis. And so I thought, what does that mean to us? Because I just, get beyond that label, what does it mean to us? What is professional identity formation? Because it definitely can be informed by our own personal experiences. And so I was going to say, like, what's my definition? What am I focusing on? And then kind of when as part of this process, what do you think is this definition of professional identity formation? Because I think there's different takes on it out there.
Any highlights? Excitedness? New idea? Heard someone's journey and made you connect with them? Yes.
What we talked a little bit about was how your professional identity and what your goals are changed so often, and the young students in particular don't realize that they might completely reinvent themselves 3-4 times on their career path.
Yes. The idea of pivoting, changing, moving in the environment. Yeah. Growing. God forbid I use the term growing with improvement. What else?
All 4 of us were the fallen trees. We definitely fell into much of what we were doing by accident and not necessarily intentionally.
Okay, so silent PIF happening here. Anything else? I'll take one more before we go into our next section.
teaching them, giving them permission to be themselves, to act with integrity to themselves, because that's their identity, right?
Beautiful.
But it was him, so.
And I really like what Inga said this morning, and I wrote it down, because I'm like, it's great. That is in the externships, it's our chance to experiment with the theoretical. And I think about, that made me think about the way that I think about professional identity formation is like a sifter. And we're constantly shaking them. We're shaking them and shaking them and trying to bring them awareness to that level. And we're shaking and shaking until all the little things fall and the big things remain as we sift, right? Our values, our goals, our passions, our interests. Like I think about that and try to use that visual when I'm thinking about the things that I'm asking them. And we'll go into a little bit. So let's go, yeah, I thought you something I thought, yeah.
One thing that kind of came to mind is the parallels with student development. And so I have my background is in education. I don't have a JD, but so in some of this, because professional identity is a new formation, is a new term for me. But many of the definitions, they tie very much back to student development.
Yeah, excellent, yes, and that's right. And I think where I came from, I also came from an education background. I was a 6th grade teacher before I went to law school and became a JD, and then naturally fit into kind of the clinical world where I taught and practiced, because I love teaching and can't get rid of it. But I think that was important. I grew, I learned about educating in modifications and individualized education. We had IEPs, we met the students where they were, and we told them where they need to be. That's what we did in public education. So when I switched to law school, I was like, that's not happening. I'm being talked to and nobody's kind of teaching me. So, this idea of teaching in this way and individualized teaching, externships are perfect for that. So let's add some context, because I think a lot of the times when we have these conversations, we talk about this, we're like, oh, that's awesome, I want to do that. So before we tell you what we do, let's tell you, the context in which we're doing it, because it's not all possible. We're going to start with Phyllis. Make sure we understand what we're comparing here.
All right, so we actually offer a 4-credit class for our externship, and it's a criminal, civil, judicial, or judicial externship. And then within the civil or criminal, it can be a law office externship or not. And then any governmental agencies and private agencies as well. And the students have a 2-hour classroom component each week. And what I've done as a part of that classroom component is to have professionalism and development along with ethics. We use the Learning from Practice book, go through those chapters, and then add to that a requirement, and I'll talk more about that later, in terms of their journals and their observations that they have to do every single week. And it has to be more than just a recitation of what they saw. They're actually, there's a process that they're required to follow. And again, I'll talk about that more when we get to that part. And then we have outside speakers and written assignments as well in terms of the agencies.
So I'm focusing on the part-time program here, and in that part-time program, we have all placement types. So we have government, judicial, nonprofits, law firms, and corporations, and they're all together. So I have a generalist seminar, and I usually can have between 10 to 25, even more sometimes, in a section. It's not separately graded either. It's part of the pass-fail, and it's part of their field. So they have basically have 14 hours of class time with me, in addition to the fieldwork hours, and they can get between 2 and 4 credits. But that class component seminar for the first-time students is, we have an orientation, which is about 4 hours at the very first day. Actually, it's the day before semester starts. And then we have like 7 every other week meetings. And I also do individualized one-on-one meeting too at midterm. And part of our, what we can do with that, well, we have journals, reflective essays, like I think everybody. We also I have self-assessments at the beginning, pre-externship and post-externship, and they have also their supervisor final evaluations, and learning plans, of course. So just the general structure of what mine looks like.
And mine at St. Mary's were mixed practice as well. Mixed as a nonprofit, government, in-house councils. We don't do private firms, but we do allow compensation. That was new. There's 3 experiential learning credits that they get as a maximum. Right now, we're at the 60 hours per credit hour. And then there's additional, so on top of if they do the maximum 3 credits, it's 180 hours. There's an additional 20 hours of curriculum time approximately that you have to do. And that consists of 2 one-hour classes. It's bookend, one in the beginning of the semester, one at the end of the semester. It's a whole sit-down class. And then 2 group meetings. They're assigned to a group meeting where it's diverse students who have diverse placements together, and they have a discussion. They do that before the midterm, and they do that after the midterm in the group meeting. And then we have 8 reflective essays, commenting, myself, I comment, and we have our faculty director who also comments. And we also have a faculty who does check-in with the supervisors and students. And then for supervisors, the supervisors are required to participate in the learning plan, do the midterm, and the final evaluation on the student and have a feedback meeting with them. And we also do the pre and post assessment of student skills. So that's giving you some context and how we're doing, in what context we're doing these modifications. So let's talk about some of the action and results that we see. Here's what we've done and how it's worked. Starting with Phyllis.
So, I think you've heard me talk about how very important it was for me for us to help our students see who they are within the context of all the other roles, individuals that exist within society and the legal profession, such as the past few ones that way. So a large part of what I do is this actualization of professional identity. And, you know, and I laugh because when Amanda and I talked about it, because it works kind of like her SIF, but in reverse. Because what I see happening is when I get the students, they've learned these laws and rules and principles, you know, much through their doctrinal classes in terms of what is a law, what is not a law, what is a contract. And then we get the code and rules of evidence, the rules of professional practice, the model rules, and how they kind of determine what happens. And then we have this great opportunity that we get with the experiential learning opportunities. So sometimes it'll be a clinic, but many times it's an externship for the reason that they talked about in the plenary session. They're cheap. So our schools tend to like them. They tend to like the opportunity to enforce them and have us do those. So one of the big ways, and this is the main focus of what I do with my students, what they have to do about with every single thing, it drives them nuts. And right now, and now I teach professional responsibility as well. So now I'm getting a chance to do it even before they get to me. And in my professional responsibility class, they have to do it. So every week the students are required to do a journal. And every week in that journal, they are required to note the behavior and actions of judges, lawyers, and any other legal professional that they encounter, including their own behavior. So they can tell me about their work, but I want to know what others, what are you seeing? And then I want to know what bothers you, or what do you think is good? About that behavior, and whether it violates the rules. Because one of the biggest things they learn, especially with the criminal externships, is the number of cases that PDs and state attorneys have. And the reality that comes to mind when all of a sudden they're taking the case to trial and they just met the witnesses today. And I can tell, did that bother you? So, you know, can you do something about that? What can you do? Is there a rule that exists? So a lot of them didn't realize there was a rule in Florida, at least, in terms of the number of cases that a public defender can have, and then the action that they can take as a result. And then I want them to think about, so what would be the ideal thing that you want to see? So I call this whole process time. I'm actually starting and trying to write an article about it, and we'll see how that works. So I call it take time. So then I want them to model, then what is the correct thing? If you see the judge yelling and screaming, if you see the judge berating counsel, what would have been the appropriate thing? Or was that judge justified? Or are you ever justified in acting, in that matter? And then the next thing is, what's the action we need to take? Because there are some rules that require us to report people. There are some rules that require you to take appropriate action. So what I really try to push them to think about is, what appropriate action will you take as an attorney when you see certain behavior? Do you want to become that lawyer? Is that what you want to be? So I kind of see that becoming the great I am. And that's kind of what the little model is about. It all evolves down after they do all of these things to them becoming the attorney that they are. Now the attorney that I am or you are, but it helps them after evaluation of the actions that they've seen, of the things that they've encountered, and of their own evaluation about that, what they would do. So that is a major focus in terms of the classroom portion of my class, and then everything else that goes on in terms of the externship or professional identity development.
So, yes, I am. So again, I had that focus of transitioning the student from student to lawyer, from that kind of protected, maybe almost dependent student and classroom environment to thriving in a dynamic and challenging profession, right? And to become self-directed learners, to accept that responsibility to others, but more importantly, or just as importantly, the responsibility to themselves, to aspire to excellence and be proactive in developing all those competencies that are needed to be successful. So what I failed to mention also about our structure is that we've actually introduced a professional identity formation course for our 1Ls. It's a one credit, but it spans 2 semesters. And I'm kind of working with them more and more because they're starting to teach some concepts that I always had claimed to in my externship program, but they're starting to teach those concepts. So they're being introduced to these ideas already. And, I looked at their goals and they're talking about, in introducing these concepts, they're talking about competencies, identifying the competencies that legal employers value, assessing their strengths and weaknesses in those competencies. They're doing this in their 1L year. Developing the strategies to acquire these competencies, developing the practices and discipline necessary for self-directed learning, and another goal there's developing the sense of professional responsibility. So they're already getting this in their 1L year. So I'm trying to build upon that. And and the thing is, externships we're talking about, that's a great place to do this, right? Because this is them to see and apply these concepts in real time, in real world. Because I'll tell you, we're getting that feedback. We just kind of introduced this last year, and first they're like, they don't understand. They're like, what's the point of all this? They think this is kindergarten stuff, to be honest. And we're trying to show them why this matters. And so we started it last year, so I have some of those 2Ls now, and I'm like, well, remember when you were talking about this? And they're like, yeah, I think we read that. I'm like, because at first I didn't want to duplicate the effort, but I'm realizing they need to hear it again now that they're actually in the placements. It actually started to make more sense. And some of them now are starting to say, oh, now I get it why we were talking about X, Y, and Z. But, so now we are here. I have now, they kind of already been introduced this information in 1L year, but, and I know Amanda's going to say this, professional identity formation is just not soft skills, right? It's kind of thinking about who they are, who they want to be, and choosing work that supports and not undermines their values and personality. So I start off by talking about what are those competencies? What are those skills and values to be successful as a lawyer and to be happy? And so we talk about the Schultz and Zadak factors, which everybody knows, and we didn't list them because I think everybody kind of knows what these are. And also that Foundations for Practice survey that was out there, we kind of discussed those and review those again. And also I have them kind of read an article about what attorneys seek from associates. This by this little article by Gloria Sween, or Gretchen Sween, I'm sorry. So anyway, we talk about that, what makes a successful attorney. And we do this like in the orientation. So they do a self-assessment on skills and discuss the values, and I have them incorporate those into their goals when they're doing their learning plan. What areas do you think you want to work on, and how can you work those into what you're going to be doing at your placement in the coming term? We also discuss that learning theory about planning, doing, reflecting, integrating, and that I always really focus at the beginning, your ultimate responsibility is you're ultimately responsible for your own development. And I say on a macro and micro level. On a macro level, you're ultimately responsible for your own professional, where you go with this profession. And I don't think they realize I have some control, I have choices I can make. So on this macro level, and then I'll talk about the micro level when you're there. Every assignment, every task you undertake, how can you learn from this? So, if you know the context of that deposition or client meeting you're going in, what would you ask? How, what information do you think needs to be get there? So they'd already do some of that evaluation before they start, intentionally, and then when they're talking to the supervisors, they can kind of follow up with some meaningful questions about, I saw you did this, why did you do that? So it's kind of one tool I tell them to utilize at the beginning. So in that midterm, I do individual one-on-one meetings, right? And I actually start having to do the 2-minute infomercial. I say, I see you working at Susan G. Komen. Tell me about that. And I throw them, and they don't realize I'm going to do this, and they're like, what? You know, and I'm trying to hear what are they seeing, articulating what they see as their skills and growth, and what they're doing. And that's the purpose of it, for them to start seeing, can I articulate what I'm actually working on, and what am I developing, and how they're conveying it to others. And then I can give them feedback. That's when, from there, we go, you know, feedback, what skills, is it aligning your values? We have a conversation after that. They also do midterm in class. We do breakout sessions where I give them questions for thought about, and also have them interview as supervisors for their placement. So in these breakout sessions, they can talk about what values do you see at work at your placement? How do they align with your values? How do you feel about your own, what competencies do you see are important in being successful there? You know, how are you feeling about your own strength development in those competencies? They do that with each other's colleagues in class. We have a final meeting in final class. They do this in front of, they do that 2-minute infomercial in front of the whole class. So they always get very excitable about that, but it's like, it's not meant to be scary. But you know, again, I said, you work at Susan G. Komen, tell me about that. And they're doing that to the whole class, and it's, you know, first of all, it's a great exercise for them to start thinking succinctly about how do I convey what I want somebody to know about me, what's important that I want them to know about me. And I say, identify that goal, how do you tell them about the skills or the knowledge you've acquired in the context of your experiences, the work you did. And then the class gives feedback on what they heard. And sometimes what the students hear is not what the students thought they were conveying. So we do that, and actually have some good feedback about that little exercise. And of course, journaling. Journaling is a great place to encourage, you know, when I see the actualization of self-development, they're taking proactive steps to, you know, to learn and engage. It's a great place to reward them and encourage them when I see those actions, like asking why, and I took the initiative here, and so obviously the journals are a great place to get that kind of feedback. And the last thing I was going to say, I actually have some returning students. We don't have a seminar class for our returning students, but I'm trying to do more with them. We want to have more student-faculty interactions than what I've been doing. So what I had them do, and I'm in the process of this right now, so I actually said, you identify an article or a TED Talk related to some competency you're trying to develop, and you know, they're going to be in small groups, not too many of them, like 2 or 3. And you're going to lead the discussion topic on this, why you know what you want us to discuss about this TED Talk. And I got feedback. We haven't had that second part of that conversation. I had them identify the TED Talk and give us what you're wanting us to watch. And some students said, I thought this was going to be a busy assignment. I really liked it. So we're in that process, and they seem to really like that idea. So moving on.
I like that.
Yeah.
So as Cecily's already mentioned, some of the things that I'm going to talk about, some of the lessons that I learned when I was doing this. We need to spend a lot of time up front explaining the importance of professional identity formation, and it's not just these soft skills, because they're like, oh, there's all these soft skills. It's fluff. I also think about the dynamic of being a woman, teaching this course, and also having directors who are women, and having male students who think that this is unnecessary. It's fluff. It's touchy-feely. I have the quote in the evaluation that's straight from the self-help books. So that I was like, the first time I introduced the PIF, and I realized, okay, I need to spend a little bit more time getting some hard facts and making sure that I'm going from A to B into why this is important. So one of the things we do is look at the survey results of the legal employers in Minnesota on the relative importance of different competencies in their decision to hire a new lawyer. And if you look at the top 5 that were considered the top, very important, 6 out of those 8 are those soft skills in their decision to hire new lawyers. That trustworthiness, that integrity, common sense, ethic. Are you attached to our mission? Are you good at developing collaborations with your coworkers? These soft skills are actually the things that make employers decide to hire these people. And that's what we're trying to do with this professional identity formation. That's what we spend some time on. We look at the list, as Cecily mentioned, Schultz the 26 lawyer effectiveness factors, and I make them go through that and think about that and with their goals as well. And I also, there was an article recently in the National Jurist about growth and fixed mindset. And before they even come to that first class, I made them watch the TED Talk by Eduardo Viceno about that growth and fixed mindset, and to look at that article. It's excellent, and it's specifically the growth and fixed mindset of law students as they enter into the profession and how that's important. That article is great, and I just pulled straight from there. So this is what I use in my first class. This is one of the PowerPoints I pulled straight. So we go through this whole learning theory with them in the beginning, and I show them that the do, reflect, integrate, plan, right? So I'm telling them that as they're going through this process of transitioning from law students to lawyers, we're introducing this learning theory. We hope you're going to use this as one of your tools. We're going to make you use this in your reflective journals. But we're hoping that this becomes a good habit, and here's why we think it's important. And then I go through and I tell them, but you also get a chance not just to deal with skills and agility. You know, I don't want you to just think about the skills, right, and your ability to do the work as lawyers, but I also want you to think about your values, your passions. You have an opportunity to form relationships with mentors and coaches. You have an opportunity to think about, is this government office something that's workable for me? Do I like the DA's office? Do I like working in this in-house counsel? Is this something I can see myself doing? So the environment and evaluating that. And what do I need from a supervisor? So I use that in particular. So there's the classroom time, and then there's the non-classroom time that I think is important. As lots of people have mentioned, using the reflective essay comments to individualize, to reward good self-directed learning. You're being proactive. I see you're seeking challenges. So making sure that I'm mentioning and reinforcing those actions that they are doing that seems to be self-directed learning, that's in that sort of realm, are suggested if they're not doing it. Small group discussions are another way for them to start doing that. I also emphasize the importance of developing support networks and building support networks. So looking at the essay feedback, you have a structured school support right now. What happens when the school's gone out of this equation? Who's going to be your support system in that way? Who's going to give you this feedback? One, you need to start developing those self-assessment skills. But two, who else is going to be there? Do you have mentors? Do you have coaches ready to go? Supervisor feedback, that's part of your mentor support. The group discussions and feedback that we do in those 2 meetings, they're learning to build colleague support. And at first, this was actually one of the experiments of let's let them go and learn from each other. And they loved it. And they really talked about stuff that I would love to get them to talk about. But every time I'm in a group and I pose a question, crickets. And then when they're in their small group, and I don't even ask the question, but I ask them, what's challenging right now? Or I asked them to talk about some of the challenges, some of the surprises, the assignment they did like, the assignment they didn't like. It naturally comes up, and they learn from each other. So the self-care, you can't pour from an empty vessel. So they have the chance to really talk about that and some of the things that they're dealing with and how they're structuring their time management, which is the biggest challenge really, as a group and with us. And then at the end, that self-directed learning, which I do in the classroom. I will show you some of the things that I do when I make them self-assess self-directed learning, where they are at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester. And then in the essay comments, I point to that. And here's what I use in class to show them. This is where you are now, and we look at that chart of self-directed learning. Are you a dependent learner? We look at that trait. Do you shy away from feedback? Do you react negatively to feedback? So we look at that and the interested learner and the involved learner traits, but really I spend a lot of time making them look at that self-directed learner traits. Are you doing all of those things? And if you're not, this is where you need to be. This is the end goal. Because in the end, all that support system from the law school goes away. And you need to have your structure set up, and you need to be self-evaluative and reflective and have these habits. Because you're always going to be learning, changing, pivoting as a lawyer. So let's do our own self-assessment right now. So where are you right now? Now that we've told you all of these things, we've made you think about your own professional identity formation journey and the different definitions of professional identity formation journey, and we talked to you about some of the things we're doing, and you're probably thinking about some of the things you're doing or not doing. Let's look at the instructions for our working groups. We're going to have about 20 minutes before it's time to come together and share. So you're going to have 20 minutes to work in your working groups, and in your working groups, I want you to find your tribe. So after all of this, take a second, think about where you're at. We have 3 tribes that are going to meet around the room. Find your tribe. Tribe number 1, you're at the basics. You're thinking about definitions. You want to work from the broad scale, maybe objectives before you think about assessment and the methods of that. So if you're in tribe number 1, you'll be coming over here and maybe pairing off and finding people to have that discussion with about building basics for professional identity formation and intentionality. Tribe 2, you've done it, you tried it, you ran into some problems, roadblocks. You want to talk about that, those challenges. Maybe find someone else that had a problem, or maybe someone else that had a success, and do that. That's going to be tribe 2. You're tackling the challenges here. Tribe 3, you're the idea generators. You're like, this is great, here's what, I don't really know what I'm doing, let me try something. I came here specifically to find more ideas. Do you have an idea? Do you need an idea? Come to the idea generating tribe over here. So we're gonna have about 20 minutes to break out into your working groups, take it off the wall. When we get in
You've
trouble.
already been
And I have
chastised about that.
markers. And you can start thinking about some of these things that come up. Any questions?
All right, go to your group.
Let's get working.
Falling down that big hole. No, remember we tried to see it.
This is kind of what we talked about last time. We were all requesting before we were all over. There we are all again.
If there's too many people in your group, break your group into 2, that's fine. Just 4 or 5 people is good.
I'll leave you.
I think you're an idea.
You need your time to get the heart. You don't it's hard as hard to get with others.
And I think I have, yeah, we talked before, like, we're doing a lot of the components of that, but it's not centered around vision. Ours is centered around our law school's mission, I guess, is knowledge, skills, and ethics. So our structure tends to be around that. And I think there's some ways to make it about
Well, I'm thinking, I have to do a presentation at the end on general placement.
but I need a lot more than 20 minutes to
have
figure
the
out
kind you're talking about.
how to get that.
And I love it.
Kind of there, but even more on the, I don't teach for the supporting
Wow. See, that's good.
And I think.
And now, is that video? That's
But in fact, this is what we're trying to do. And then, you know, I have other people who are like, I was just saying, when the students react and say like, this is just fluff. Yeah, I mean, I have some people teaching this course who be like that too. So I have pretty diverse like perspectives, and these are the people like that. You know, I'm not starting from scratch.
Are they adjuncts?
The ones who see it more as fluffy are actually the one full-time professor.
Yeah. That's a lot of our stand-up.
I'd rather get
So I'm kind of like, how much should it be part of our classroom component? How much should I try to band-aid that, for lack of a better word? How much are we,
What do you do about that?
this is part of a bigger picture of
And those become,
Yeah, well,
It could be kind of an unspoken mission, right? You could say, in your mind, this is what we're aiming for, but we don't identify it that way or call it that.
I almost feel like you do the opposite of what we were
Subversive.
talking about before. Instead of calling it professional identity formation, you call it competencies. They were building lawyer competencies.
to sort of change your language around.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Yeah, because the
Right.
person I'm thinking of who would say this more like cluster. If he would say we should be focusing on, just the lawyers.
Yeah.
And so using
So I haven't talked about, like, someone say I'm doing this
And then you
place,
show them that
and
survey.
I don't want to do this, and here's why.
Yeah, there's
But I'm
lots
glad I
of
have
things
you
like that out, so it's not.
Yeah, that's been really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I knew about it, but I didn't understand it.
Exactly. I like that. I like that. And they will love the fact that we will have those minutes, 15 minutes.
That's part of it. It's also they can like resumes, cover letters, and that kind of stuff. So they do all that. So how do you continue that?
Oh, I love it. Oh, I have a bell for that. I actually have.
How they run it.
We have the same thing, we have professional development for 1L
I
here,
do
and
too.
they
I will
talk
go
about
for
that,
it.
right? About a lot of this stuff. I work
Training for the bar
within.
exam.
Well, not as much. It's
See, we could do that.
No, it sounds ours is a introduction to lawyer.
Is it a credit?
Yeah, it's a credit class, and they also learn about the practice areas. I mean, it's sort of like intro to the judicial system, and it's a big wide.
So it's a small group discussion.
Look up
Right.
that.
We have the large
Practice
group, but I haven't used
development.
that.
No credit online, so they do an assignment every term, through, all the way through their, like.
My dad's doing it, so classroom at all. And I don't need some of that volume. So I'm trying to figure out a way to bring them in.
It's taught by somebody in the commercial representation, who gives very professional development on this, as well as faculty. And it's a lot of the soft skills.
Exactly.
Tell them that.
Oh, and it really. What they want to learn and then learning that.
But they have to take personality, the marketing side of things, beginning, and then we try to direct them towards, like, help them direct themselves towards where they're at. Makes sense for them, and then talk about what you do if you're going to be, a litigator. What classes do you do, what lawyers do you talk to, do the career planning, be introduced to those practice areas. But we also talk about, like, how are you going to behave ethically as a lawyer? How are you going to do what needs to be? How are you going to be happy in your profession? So it's really a mixed bag.
That's what my students say.
I just eavesdropping, thought I'd participate.
They feel like the externship class is kind of part two.
Well, and that's what I almost try to make it that.
It should be, I don't want to overlap, I probably study without you.
Yeah. I think I have like a problem when I'm defining it is that there's this broad spectrum of values and ethics and skills, and everybody comes from somewhere different. And I have this broad, wonderful student body, and really, they're all of me. I feel like they're so different. Like, I have a cultural competency course, and the one guy in the back goes, well, I'm probably trying to be number one. I mean, he's doing it for a laugh, and it was fine, because he's a nice guy. But how do you then go from that to, well, let's really talk about what your clients are facing, because you've already identified that you know your privilege and you're screwing with everybody, So I have to teach everybody in that class how to be a good lawyer. And they all have different ideas of what kind of lawyer and where they're going to be. And I want to work in a firm, so my values should be money. Okay, maybe that's true. What, if the guy sitting next to you doesn't have the same values? How do I bind you guys together? How do I teach to the lowest and highest common? Well, then people aren't going to hire your firm if they don't know how to be culturally competent, right?
True. I'll go back to what you said though. We purposely were here because students are in a very different place in the beginning of their law school career and at the end of their law school career, and they're very, very different answers. Not only do they change their focus on what they want to do, they're different people. And so we purposely in our professional courses, we do like the personal assessment, we do it like 3 different times across 3 years, and you can see what's changed about you. And so we do a lot of purposeful, repetitive stuff.
So how many have like introduction to these concepts in the 1 year now? How many?
Not named, but yes. I mean, it's not focused around.
So they don't get it yet,
No,
right?
yeah, I mean, and sometimes we
It's just
just talked about
more
moving
busy
it
work.
to the second
Yeah.
part of the year, but
And don't worry,
You do too, you guys do the first semester.
So what's schools?
I'm at East
yeah.
Coast.
And because, and I tell them, this is not what it's really gonna look like. But this is a
Okay, well, I was on our way out here. So I was gonna call you. Because we're assessing what we're doing with our program in a way.
Yeah.
So,
So I think that I don't know how we convey this message to the students, but the other part of my job is employer outreach. And I'm sitting down and having coffee with alumni and employers and all this stuff. And I tell them about our 1L professional development curriculum. And they're just blown away. They're like, man, I wish I had that when I was in law school. I had the same thing when I heard about it. So it's how do you tell them that you are so blessed to be living in this time when people want to help you figure out what to do with your life versus just like fly by the seat of your pants.
no, until they actually
Right, exactly.
and that's one thing that we came across is that when they come back to us, they're told they're here to do an externship. They're like, oh, kind of like you described it. Oh, and so we've just kind of designed. I mean, we've made changes to the curriculum. Now all of the FM1 now we have to do it, but just kind of redone ourselves. Complain and moan and push back and resist. And then we encourage them to use better techniques. And then just those first 10 weeks and then the goals are done with it. And so just sort of, surrendering to, not gonna get it, have their words clear.
But maybe one day.
No, you can't have ice cream for dinner. And complaining about it. So that's a challenge, right? They're hearing it, they're 1 all year, they're not, it's not making sense to them, they don't understand, and that's why, I mean, honestly, they think this is stuff I've heard in kindergarten, whatever. But, I have some internships, so I'm getting, we got the first time last year, some of the students are not too well, and these some of the concepts I was already doing, now they're saying, well, I'm hearing it again in the externship class. It's repetitive, but yet some kids are mature enough, they're seeing the connections. So, and then it's like maturity and wisdom we have to bring to this. So, even though I'm talking about this, I'm like, I am evolving on what I'm doing.
Right.
But they just, because they're separated, they're doing that PI class 1 here, and it's not connection to the real world, right? They're not making that connection.
they're having to think, okay, you did this. For me, I do the same kind of assignments now that we have done.
So in their guys' 1L, so in our 1L class, they actually do a little bit of field work. They actually go to a placement site. Yeah, based on whoever's teaching. So we have 30 adjuncts that teach. And there's a toss up between faculty and practitioners.
Cecily does that.
A number of them are because they say the same thing. I wish I had it. So they get a little bit. I mean, I see like a. Yes, many of them are they're teaching courses or they supervise students in the past or clinical faculty who already work with different placements, so they or they do simulations.
How many hours have we done?
I don't remember.
It has been somewhat substantive.
Ours go observe. I think that's one of the assumptions. Do they have to go observe?
So, giving credit to those.
So I haven't asked the effectiveness of it, but we have practitioners come in, so they have so to have a credit each semester. And so they have 3 large group discussions, and then they have 3 small group discussions that's led by a practitioner, usually an alum who comes back in. And they got TAs working at that, and then they have some online forum, so if that might help with that practitioner saying, this is just, sometimes from us, they're like,
It's going to take a little bit of time. I'm sure people roll their eyes about having to take it, right? So, I mean, it's just going to take a little bit of time for them to realize that this is now about education. So,
That's what I mean.
And then we also graduated, so it wasn't mandatory for them, they're gone.
Right,
That's the other.
well, and I think it's like the people in the class above them, it's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, once you get everybody else, you didn't have it required, that helps a ton.
Right, yeah.
So everything.
So, do you guys talk about like what you think the objectives of professional identity? Because that's, I think, one of the questions is like the objectives or challenges, because I do call it a label. Some people
Okay,
are in this
let's
world kind of like, what
wrap
does that
up so we
mean?
can share
Some
some
practitioners ask me,
great
what do you mean by this?
Or
Yeah.
challenges and some solutions to
Why I came to this
challenges.
section.
But there are some different emphasis. I think there's overarching themes.
Okay.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, I think we basically
Yeah.
said, we don't, some of us don't have one, and it would take a lot more than 20 minutes to get one, because there's so many out there and you have to pick one.
Yeah.
And
Together what you're already doing. I mean, I think that's a
fit
good
in
part.
with your school's mission and values and all that stuff.
Okay, did anyone actually write anything down? I know idea generator, we
I
did
know.
not write anything down.
They wrote things down. in the
But I'll
comments.
have, you
You're
know,
right, you know.
we can talk about some of the ideas we came up with. And then I want to hear some of the solutions to challenges. Did we figure out all the problems of the world? Should we start off there? And to, yeah, we just talked about the challenges. How about the inverse? How about the inverse? Does it feel good to get it all out?
We talked,
Repeat the
we shared struggles.
Now, so we're gonna do this very quickly, so I'll give you 60 seconds or less to give me highlights. Highlights.
So we're all, I guess, we think we kind of are working in the arena, but we haven't named it this and formed around it. And we
Take
think
those labels away.
well, and we think it'd take a lot more than 20 minutes to
Yeah.
mesh our
Yes.
idea of what
Yes.
identity formation is with what our school's culture and values and mission is. And so we think it's probably a good thing to do.
Yeah, and that's why we gave it the time to do it.
Either openly or in some cases maybe subversively, because we think people will like run from the terms, but we can do it anyway.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. Anything else?
Good, thank you. Challenges, highlights, highlights.
The highlights are that we listed the challenges and came up with no solutions whatsoever. What some challenges are. We did have one solution.
Oh, right.
One potential solution. So the challenges that we identified were student buy-in and being resistant to the concept because they want, they're looking for a job. The challenge of dealing with non-traditional students who feel as if they've already gone through this and navigated this concept of professional identity formation, rather than seeing it as an ongoing process. Faculty resistance, consistently, that was one, and the next was consistently integrating professional identity formation across externship curriculum. So if you're, teaching one component, but you have other adjunct faculty teaching other pieces of it, how do you maintain the consistency with focusing on professional identity formation? And then the last was motivating students to maintain or foster those networking relationships that they build through the course of externships. So we did a little bit address buy-in and how you can think about that in terms of getting a job. And if I can, I think hopefully I'm accurately stating it, but essentially it's just motivating students to maintain that emphasis on being mindful and intentional about how they approach their career search and how they approach long-term as opposed to short-term. So maybe you can't get a job that perfectly aligns right now with your professional identity formation, but being mindful of that throughout the process of your career. And this is kind of laying the foundation so you're aware of what it is and you're reflective throughout your career.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to noticing it's a soft skill, but if you want to think about it, it's soft skills, right? But it's one of the things that employers are looking for. Your drive, your commitment to the mission, your ability to work in a team and to move and to navigate and be flexible. Idea generators, did we disperse? Everyone moved away. We had a lot of ideas over here. Want to share something you're taking away and potentially doing? Idea generators? No. That wasn't over there.
Keep all the ideas to yourselves, huh?
I know you have them.
Are you talking to me? Okay, so I'm going to steal y'all's idea about the 2-minute job interview. because right now I do a different kind of group presentation, but it's a little bit too long. And I'm going to use that, and I'm also going to work the Schultz competency factors in. So I didn't really help anybody. I just stole your stuff.
All right.
Any other, yeah?
Well, no, I just want to do a closing kind of remark. We talked about personal identity, this definition, and we didn't talk about our institutional buy-in and how much that matters. And I was like, it's really nice that I gave this great little presentation of all these things, but I never once told you I had institutional buy-in for the beliefs, my beliefs in terms of personal identity. So that's a challenging thing, and can be a challenge sometimes. And I wanted to be honest in terms of saying that, yeah.
Does anybody, or some of these reflections or some of the components of the professional identity, is there language in helping students put together their learning plan as a way of them actually hitting those markers beyond just what they wanted to learn there, but actually some of those components that they need to address when they're completing their learning plan? Does anybody do that?
I'm thinking about if it is in Marking the Path, the Harrisburg Law Review article, if there's anything on that, I can't remember.
So that's a great article. Where they, structured, a couple of people have structured their whole generalist seminars around professional identity formation. I know Kendall Carew has this huge learning plan that's in stages. I don't know if that's answering your question.
No, so I mean directly so in our learning plan we have them we tell our students what are some of the goals of what you want to learn while you're there, and what is it, those kind of things. But I'm thinking that this would be a way more with intent to.
So yeah, my orientation. So they do the self-assessment, and it's got, and it mirrors my evaluation that supervisors do it. So a lot of the legal skills are on there, right? And also, though, I say other competencies, some of these soft skills or whatever. And I grouped them according to the Schultz-Zidek factors. I put those in there, okay? So I said, assess yourself on those. And we talk in the orientation about, well, okay, how strong, how do you feel about these? And then try to incorporate those into your goals. How can you maybe try to work on those intentionally? Well, raising the awareness in their mind about this, incorporating those goals, and then in the type of assignments. Because with my goals, I don't just stop goals, right? Most of us do, what kind of things do you think you're going to be doing? Identify specific tasks, right? And I also do that measure of progress, too, in my learning plan. But that's how I try to tie it together, at least in the learning plan.
And those slides that I showed you, I actually do a video orientation, different parts of the video orientation, and my goals video uses those slides as I talk through that. And part of that also uses the goals exercise where they work on their learning plan and they draft it. So that's the beginning, those are the beginning of my goals. The one with the learning theory, I use that and the goals to start that conversation before they sit down and work on their learning plan.
We talk about buy-in too. At the very beginning, we talk about what employers look for and value, and it's just not legal skills. We have that conversation, and you pull some of these studies out, like Zolzadek, and the recent one, the Foundations for Practice, trying to help get that buy-in of why you're even talking about this. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys.
Right.